The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land can stand before their arms, from Hatti, Kod, Karkemish, Arzawa and Alashia on being cut off at one time. A camp was set up in one place in Amuru. They desolated its people, and its land was like that which has never come into being. They were coming forward toward Egypt, while the flame was prepared before them. Their confederation was the Peliset, Cheker, Shekelesh, Denian and Weshwesh lands united. They laid their hands upon the lands as far as the circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting our plans will succeed. These words were inscribed on the mortuary temple of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III at Medinet Habu. They describe a confederation of foreign peoples advancing through the eastern Mediterranean before eventually reaching the borders of Egypt. Today we know these mysterious invaders collectively as the Sea Peoples, yet who they were, where they came from and what role they played in the destruction of the Bronze Age world remain among the greatest mysteries of ancient history. To understand the scale of what followed, we must first look at the world into which the Sea Peoples appeared. During the 13th century BC, the eastern Mediterranean was dominated by a number of powerful kingdoms. Egypt controlled the Nile Valley and large parts of the southern Levant. The Hittite Empire ruled much of Anatolia and northern Syria, while Assyria was expanding across northern Mesopotamia. In Greece, the Mycenaean civilization was divided among powerful palace kingdoms, while the island of Cyprus prospered from its position at the center of Mediterranean trade. These kingdoms formed part of an enormous network of trade. Ships carried goods between the Aegean, the Levant, and Egypt. Cyprus was particularly important because of its rich deposits of copper, one of the two principal metals required to produce bronze. Coastal cities grew wealthy by controlling the movement of these goods, while improvements in maritime technology made travel across the Mediterranean increasingly efficient. The rulers themselves were also connected through diplomacy. They exchanged gifts and addressed one another as brothers. Even Egypt and the Hittite Empire, after fighting the famous Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, eventually concluded a peace treaty. The royal families intermarried, and the two former enemies established close diplomatic relations. The first group associated with the Sea Peoples to appear in Egyptian records were the Sherden, mentioned as early as the 14th century BC. According to an inscription from the reign of Ramses II, Sherden raiders attacked Egypt by sea. Ramses defeated them, captured many of the warriors, and incorporated some of them into his own army. In 1274, when Ramses II marched north to fight the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, Sherden warriors fought in the Egyptian army. On the opposite side, another people later associated with the Sea Peoples, the Luca, fought alongside the Hittites. For several decades, the great powers of the eastern Mediterranean continued much as before. Yet, toward the end of the 13th century, signs of serious instability began to appear. Texts from the Hittite world reveal growing concern over shortages of grain. The Hittite Empire depended increasingly upon shipments from abroad, including supplies transported through Ugarit, a vassal city, and assistance from Egypt. One surviving text describes the situation as a matter of life or death. Evidence suggests that these shortages may have formed part of a much larger environmental crisis. Studies of pollen, lake levels, and other climate records indicate increasingly dry conditions across parts of the eastern Mediterranean around the end of the Bronze Age. Declining rainfall would have placed enormous pressure on societies dependent upon agriculture. Exactly how severe the drought was, how long it lasted, and how directly it contributed to the collapse remain debated. But famine and food shortages are clearly present in the surviving written evidence. At the same time, the region was becoming increasingly unstable. Piracy threatened maritime trade, while some settlements show evidence of violent destruction. Earthquakes may have also struck parts of the eastern Mediterranean during this period. Then, during the reign of the Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah, the Sea Peoples appear once again. Around 1208 BC, Egypt faced a major invasion from the west. A coalition of Libyan tribes advanced against the Nile Delta, accompanied by several foreign groups. Egyptian inscriptions identify among them the Shedden, Shekelesh, Luka, Teresh, and Ekwesh. Merneptah defeated the coalition, and the Egyptians recorded their victory on several monuments, including the great inscription at Karnak. Around 1200 BC, destruction spread across the eastern Mediterranean. In Greece, the Mycenaean civilization collapsed. The great palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, and Thebes were destroyed. Some settlements continued to be inhabited, but the highly organized palace society that had dominated Greece for centuries never recovered. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire was already struggling with internal instability and shortages of food. Its final king, Suppiluliuma II, fought several campaigns against approaching enemies. Eventually, the Hittite state could no longer hold together. Many of its cities were destroyed, and Hattusha, the imperial capital, was deserted. After centuries as one of the dominant powers of the Near East, the Hittite Empire was no more. Further south, Ugarit faced its own destruction. The final tablets recovered from the city provide a remarkable glimpse into its last days. They speak of enemy ships appearing along the coast, while much of the kingdom's military and fleet were away assisting the Hittites. Around 1190 BC, the city was violently destroyed, its palaces and houses burned. Cyprus was also struck. Numerous settlements suffered destruction or abandonment. In 1177 BC, Egypt faced the invasion of the Sea Peoples. According to the inscriptions at Medinet Habu, the invaders had already passed through several regions before reaching Egyptian territory. The reliefs at the temple revealed something particularly important about these people. Behind the warriors travelled ox-drawn carts carrying women and children. Their presence has led many scholars to interpret at least part of the movement as a migration rather than a conventional military invasion. These were possibly entire communities searching for new lands in which to settle. Ramses prepared to meet them on both land and sea. The Egyptian reliefs depict a chaotic naval battle in which Egyptian archers fire into the enemy ships while other vessels are overturned and their crews thrown into the water. On land, Egyptian troops confront the advancing warriors and their carts. Ramses claimed a complete victory. The inscriptions describe the enemy as destroyed or captured and brought under Egyptian control. The surviving records suggest that at least some of the defeated groups were subsequently settled in the Levant. The victory saved Egypt from the fate suffered by many of its neighbours, but Egypt itself was already weakened and the world over which it had once exercised enormous influence was disappearing. Despite their reputation, we still do not know who the Sea Peoples were. Egyptian records provide the names of several different groups, including the Shedden, Shekelesh, Luka, Teresh, Ekwesh, Peleset, Sheker, Denian, and Weshwesh. Their names have inspired countless attempts to identify their homelands. The Shedden have often been connected with Sardinia, the Shekelesh with Sicily, and the Teresh with peoples later associated with the Tyrrhenian world. The Peleset are generally associated with the Philistines, who subsequently settled along the southern coast of Canaan. But similarities between ancient names can be misleading. Contemporary evidence securely identifies only a small number of these groups geographically. The Luka can be connected with Lycia in southwestern Anatolia. A proposed connection between the Ekwesh and the Achaean or Mycenaean Greeks remains possible but uncertain, while the Denian have been variously connected with the Aegean, Cilicia, and northern Syria. For most of the other groups, their homelands simply cannot be established from contemporary written evidence. Archaeology nevertheless provides some clues. During the early 12th century BC, new forms of pottery, cooking vessels, and domestic practices with strong Aegean connections appeared in parts of Cyprus and the southern Levant. In settlements associated with the Philistines, locally produced pottery followed Mycenaean traditions, while new cooking practices and other elements of everyday life differed from earlier Canaanite customs. This suggests that at least some populations really did migrate from regions connected with the Aegean world, but the archaeological evidence also reveals considerable diversity. This is to be expected, as the Sea Peoples were not a single nation, but a collection of different groups. So, Did the Sea Peoples really cause the Bronze Age collapse? Today, few historians accept such a straightforward explanation. As we have seen, the crisis had already begun before the invasions, as many of the societies attacked by the Sea Peoples were already under considerable pressure. The interconnected nature of the Bronze Age world may have made the situation considerably worse. The kingdoms of the Eastern Mediterranean depended upon one another for trade and essential resources. As individual states began to weaken or disappear, the networks connecting them also began to break down. This could have created a chain reaction. The disruption of trade placed further pressure on already weakened kingdoms, while the collapse in turn disrupted the trade of their neighbours. A crisis in one part of the Eastern Mediterranean could therefore spread throughout the entire system. The Sea Peoples therefore may have been both a cause and a consequence of the catastrophe. Their attacks certainly contributed to the destruction, but the presence of women and children among those who reached Egypt suggests that at least some of these groups may have been migrants, displaced by the upheavals already transforming the Mediterranean world.